Welcome to Banking and Finance Television. Today my guests are Siegfried van Puyvelde and Nancy Masschelein. Welcome to the interview. We're going to discuss today new legislation in financial institutions. And my first question would be, in the old days, the old normal, the government was a stable institute. Nowadays, the government has bailed out the banks, governments are bailing out other governments, and there's still no new legislation for financial institutions. Maybe there is a little bit. Why, Siegfried, is there not new legislation yet?
Well, Jeroen, it really is coming, and today what you see is that you have the European level, and at that European level legislation is made, and then that needs to trickle down to national regulation. And that is what is happening. We've already seen for the last year or so that this is happening. There are a lot of consultative papers, there's a lot of regulation at the European level, and for instance, liquidity risk, it trickles already down in Europe, but especially in the UK. UK has taken a forefront role in this and has defined a very sharp and very deep regulation on liquidity risk.
What kind of legislation do you expect in the near future?
Well, as I mentioned, liquidity risk is definitely the issue that is high on the agenda of every national regulator and on the agenda of every bank. So we expect a lot to see there happening in the next quarters, especially in continental Europe, now that the UK has taken a forefront role in this. There's a lot of discussion recently about Basel III, but this is probably in a much further future to come.
Okay. There's a famous samurai saying in Japan that you learn the rules to ultimately free yourself from those rules. Do you think we get more and more rules in this financial institution sector?
That is definitely the trend today, and banks really complain about it. But if you see what had happened due to the financial crisis, it is a normal reaction from the nations, from the different countries, to push forward for more regulation. Obviously, banks will have to position themselves for that, and we also see that trend that it's, in a sense, as you say, will free them. It probably instills them to get better risk management practices inside the organization. We've seen that the organizations that have been most resistant to the financial crisis are the ones that had proper and sound risk management already in place. And now, even despite some delay in the regulation, we see that many banks now invest heavily in risk management applications, in a risk management culture, because they know that this is now a core part of their business, and that for too long they've given too much leeway to the business development side, and they have to manage the both sides, the risk management side as well. So that is, we see as, going back to your samurai saying, they're looking themselves for the freedom, they're looking themselves to find the right balance between the risk and the reward.
Okay, thank you. And Nancy, can you elaborate on what you find on challenges with your clients today?
Challenges are numerous, especially as Siegfried already mentioned, there's this new regulation on liquidity risk in the UK, and if you look at it, the first time that I saw it, I fell almost from my chair, because it's really onerous, and I come from the regulatory side, so I joined Finarch about a year and a half ago. So even from a regulatory point of view, I was quite surprised to see this regulation, especially the granularity. The data items that are required is really a lot. They ask for every single item of your assets, of the liability side, of the off-balance sheets. Every single item needs to be reported. So if every single item needs to be reported and managed, then you also need to have one integrated data model in which you can store all this information. Because if you want to have an integrated risk management system, you have to have an integrated data model as well. The one does not go without the other. And it's only once you have your data in your data model that you can start doing your liquidity risk calculations, which are necessary for your reporting purposes. In liquidity risk calculations, then I talk about cash flow generations, because liquidity risk is all about looking at cash inflows, looking at cash outflows, comparing the inflows and the outflows, and see whether you have sufficient liquid asset buffers available to cover your deficits in flows. Once you've done that, when you looked at that, you also want to perform stress testing analysis. If you look at all the regulations, be it still consultative documents on the Basel Committee level, or be it already really legislation as in the UK, then the term stress testing, it pops up on every single page, minimum twice almost. You have to have a good stress testing engine in place.
I'm wondering if you collect all these data from your sources, it is too much data, too little information, and most of the time it's too late. It's backward looking. It's a little song, I think. It's too much, too little, too late. So then you have all this data in such a complex world, which is moving and changing all the time. How do you make these data sets into comprehensive information that people can understand? I think the understanding of the risks is maybe the most difficult.
Yeah. Two things. Transparency. If you have a transparent risk management system and you know the risk that you adhere to, then that's an important thing. Transparency. Then you know what you adhere to. You know every single formula that's behind every single model that you apply. Second, stress testing. We already talked about that a few seconds ago. If you perform stress scenarios, if you perform a stress analysis, that's something that you can, as a user, as management, you can interpret that. If you say to your manager, tomorrow, half of your core deposits, they will not be anymore on your balance sheet, that's something that everyone understands. That's something very concrete. Yeah. And if you say, if this happens, and this is something you can understand, this has an impact on your liquidity position in such a way, that helps. That makes your risk management tool understandable. On the one hand, to make your risk management tool transparent, that you make sure that the people that need to work with it understand the formulas, and the people that need to make the decisions, that you can translate your tool from scenarios, something realistic, into figures on which good decisions can be taken.
Okay, thank you. That's clear to me.
The word that's important,
you can add on that, yes?
The word that's important there, linked to what Nancy said about transparency, is auditability. Because that is one of the aspects which has emerged from the crisis. People didn't know what was happening at banks. Even the regulators didn't know what was happening. With what the system that Nancy describes, because you have that trace, you can look at what's inside, and whether it's external or internal, you can audit the system. And I think that's very important.
Okay. Thank you for the interview, Siegfried, Nancy. Thank you for watching Banking and Finance Television, and see you next time.